The Underground Colony. Chapter 1, Rust and Dust. There's no rain on Mars. At least, not the kind remembered from old Earth records. Here, in the Red Ghetto, as Colony 7, carved into the rock beneath the dusty surface, was sometimes jokingly called, rain was a metaphor for the crumbling rust that streaked the walls and the fine, persistent dust that got everywhere, despite all the filters. My name is Caleb. I don't remember Earth. None of us, the generations born here in the bowels of Mars, do. Our knowledge of the blue planet comes from dull holograms in the archives and warnings of the great extinction that forced our ancestors to flee. Our home is a tangled web of steel beams, glowing pipes, and airtight hatches, an endless labyrinth of levels, each serving its own purpose: residential quarters, hydroponic farms, laboratories, mines. My job is to keep it all running. I'm a life support systems engineer, to be precise. That means I'm responsible for making sure the air is breathable, the water circulates, and the lights stay on. For the past few months, that job has been a nightmare. It started with small things. Minor pressure fluctuations in the atmospheric locks. Isolated failures in the water regeneration system, where instead of clean H2O, you'd suddenly get murky, foul-smelling liquid. At first, we blamed wear and tear. The colony was 200 years old, and while our technology surpassed Earth's, nothing lasts forever. But then it got more serious. The oxygen supply to Sector A-17 dropped to critical levels for several minutes. Panic. Shouts over the intercom. I had to manually reroute flows, risking the stability of the entire network. The Council of Elders, a group of respected but very conservative individuals, blamed it on software issues and ordered increased vigilance. They always did that. Pushed problems into a corner until they started biting. I sat in my compartment, which looked more like a cluttered storeroom than living quarters. Scattered schematics lay on the table, a cup of cold synthetic coffee, and my trusty tablet, which was always with me. On the screen, a power distribution graph flickered. For the past 24 hours, I'd noticed an anomaly: spikes in consumption in distant, abandoned sectors of Colony 7. Sectors that had been sealed off decades ago due to ground instability. I ran diagnostics through all channels, ignoring official protocols. My gut screamed that this wasn't just wear and tear. It was too systematic. Too malicious. Suddenly, the screen flickered, and a message appeared: unauthorized access. Attempted security protocol breach. My heart jumped. A breach? Who? Why? The colony's security system was one of the most advanced, practically invulnerable. It was designed to protect against external threats, space debris, meteoroids, anything that could breach our rocky shell. But an internal breach? It was unthinkable. I tried to trace the source. The signal hopped, looped through old, rarely used cable lines, leading me deeper and deeper into the bowels of Mars, to the lowest, forgotten levels, where nothing but empty rock was supposed to exist. This is madness, I whispered to myself, rubbing my tired eyes. But excitement and urgency drove me forward. I activated an emergency isolation protocol to prevent further spread of the breach and began preparing to leave. If someone or something was down there, I had to find out. And immediately. I wore my standard engineer's jumpsuit, but I put on a thick thermal vest. The lower levels could be cold. I took a flashlight, a multi-tool, a communicator, and a spare battery. My backpack contained a few energy bars and a flask of water. Despite my exhaustion, I felt a surge of adrenaline. This was more than just a malfunction. This was a fight. I called the nearest cargo lift, designed for moving supplies between levels. It was slow and cumbersome, but it was the only one that could go so deep. The ride took almost an hour, and each level we passed grew darker and emptier. Residential sections gave way to storage areas, then mines, and finally, just tunnels carved into the red rock. Finally, the lift stopped. Sensors showed 0 air pressure. That meant there were no airtight locks here. This was a truly abandoned sector. I'd have to put on my environmental suit. I stepped out of the lift into the gloom. Its indicator lights barely penetrated the dust hanging in the air. A tunnel stretched before me, disappearing into darkness. The cold seeped into my bones. And somewhere in that darkness lay a clue that, I felt, would change everything. Chapter 2, Whispers from the Void. I sealed the helmet of my environmental suit. The air inside was filtered and cool. I switched on my internal headlamp, which cut through the darkness, revealing an ancient, abandoned tunnel. The walls were roughly hewn, unfinished, unlike in the residential sectors. Everywhere hung a cobweb of rusted cables and long-dead pipes. Every step I took echoed in the dead silence. My tablet beeped, indicating a direction. The signal was weak but constant. It led me deeper and deeper, through labyrinths of tunnels, many of which were choked with rubble or blocked by collapsed ceilings. I crawled, squeezed through narrow crevices, my nerves stretched taut. After a while, I came across something that made me stop. Ahead, in the beam of my flashlight, a massive, airtight hatch loomed. It wasn't like the colony's hatches. It was ancient, crude, covered in a thick layer of dust, but on its surface, faint, angular symbols were etched, strange, unfamiliar marks I'd never seen in any of our archives. Near the hatch were signs of recent work. Piles of freshly excavated rock, tools left in haste. So, I was on the right track. Someone had broken in here. I tried to activate the hatch, but it didn't respond. It seemed to be locked from the inside or unpowered. My tablet vibrated again, and this time the signal came directly from beyond the hatch. It was stronger. I began to examine the walls around it, searching for a way around. And I found it, a narrow, almost invisible fissure, disguised as a natural crack in the rock. It was too small for me in my full suit, but I managed to remove my helmet and squeeze through, leaving my backpack outside. When I was inside, I immediately felt a difference. The air was heavy, stale, but to my surprise, breathable. The humidity was high. And from somewhere, a faint, strange smell wafted, like rotting leaves and fresh earth. It was impossible. There couldn't be such organic matter here, under Mars. My flashlight illuminated a vast cavern. It was enormous, much larger than any known underground space in the colony. Primitive dwellings, cobbled together from metal scraps and some fibrous materials, were clustered in the center. I saw hearths from which thin smoke rose, and even crude tools made of stone and bone. This was a colony. A real, primitive colony. People lived here. Suddenly, I heard movement. My hand went for my multi-tool, but I stopped. A figure emerged from behind one of the shelters. It was a person. A woman, to be precise. Her hair was braided into thick plaits, and her clothes consisted of crudely sewn furs. She held something like a spear with a sharpened stone tip. Her eyes, wide open, stared directly at me. There was no fear or aggression in them, only pure, undisguised curiosity. "Who are you?" The woman's voice was low and firm. She spoke a dialect I barely understood, but the meaning was clear. I slowly raised my hands, showing I posed no threat. "I'm Caleb. I'm from Colony 7. I'm an engineer." The woman narrowed her eyes. "Colony 7? We've heard of you. Those who live under glass. Those who have forgotten what it means to breathe real air." "We're not under glass, we're protected," I corrected her. "Who are you? How did you get here?" She smiled, and her smile was strange, almost wild. "We are the true ones. We are those who remained. Who refused your machines and your false heavens. We are the children of Mars." Her words struck me to the core. So, the hackers weren't some external threat, but people. People who had lived here, underground, all this time, in isolation from us. Others began to emerge from behind the shelters. Men, women, children. Their faces were weathered, their eyes accustomed to the dim light. They were lean but strong, their bodies covered in angular tattoos, similar to those on the hatch. "Why are you breaching our systems?" I asked, feeling anger begin to boil within me. "You could have killed us. You're polluting our air, our water." "Polluting?" The woman chuckled. "It is you who pollutes. You contaminate this planet with your machines. You drink from its veins but give nothing in return. We are simply taking back what belongs to us. And to you." "What do you mean?" The woman stepped closer. A shadow of sorrow flickered in her eyes. "This planet did not want to let us go. Our ancestors tried to fly away when Earth was dying. But Mars did not fully accept them. It granted them refuge but took a part of their souls. It wanted them to live on its surface, under its sky, not to hide in iron and light." You want us to go to the surface?" I was stunned. It was insane. The surface of Mars was lethal. Thin atmosphere, radiation, extreme temperature fluctuations. No one could survive there without complex equipment. "Mars gives life to those who are willing to accept it," she replied, smiling mysteriously. "We live there. Our children are born there. We breathe its air." I was in shock. It was incredible. If they could live on the surface, it changed everything. "Why didn't you tell us? Why didn't you contact us?" "You wouldn't have believed," she answered. "You've lived too long in your cages. You've been too afraid of the truth. We tried. Many times. But you didn't listen. We realized the only way to save you was to force you out." I looked at her, at these true ones, living in dimness, among dirt and stone, but with some wild, inexplicable strength in their eyes. They were primitive, yet they possessed knowledge that was inaccessible to us. You're trying to destroy us to make us leave? I couldn't believe my ears. We are trying to break your cages, she calmly replied. We are creating pressure. If you do not wish to leave on your own, Mars will force you. I felt a cold sweat run down my spine. These people weren't enemies in the usual sense. They were fanatics, convinced of their righteousness. And they were willing to do anything to make us accept their truth. My name is Lyra, she said, extending her hand. Her palm was rough and warm. Welcome to Mars, Caleb. Chapter 3, Two Truths. I spent the next few days in the settlement of the True Ones. Lyra, their leader, showed me their world. It was so unlike Colony 7 that I felt like an alien on my own planet. They lived a simple life, hunting some primitive local life forms that, it turned out, inhabited the deep caves of Mars, feeding on geothermal energy. They gathered minerals, using them for primitive tools and even to create a kind of biological fuel that sustained their hearths. Their food was crude but nourishing. They had no computers, no robots, not even ordinary mechanisms. Everything was made by hand, from what Mars provided them. The most striking thing was that they actually lived on the surface. Lyra showed me the exit from their cave, so skillfully disguised that I would never have found it. I saw a Martian sunrise. Not through a monitor, not through thick glass, but as it was meant to be, an orange sky dotted with stars, and the rising sun painting the red dunes in golden hues. I stood there in an environmental suit she lent me, breathing air that seemed filled with something wild and primordial. How do you do it? I asked Lyra when we returned to the cave. How do you survive outside without our technology? Mars adapted us, she replied. We are its children. We went through generations of selection. Those who were weak died. Those who adapted survived. Our skin became thicker, our lungs stronger. We eat only what Mars gives us. And it accepted us. I pondered her words, trying to reconcile them with everything I'd been taught my whole life. We were taught that Mars was a deadly desert, that only technology allowed us to survive. Yet, they lived here, as part of nature, even if that nature was alien and harsh. But there was another side. The attacks on the colony. Failures in the life support system continued. I saw how the True Ones used primitive but effective devices, made from minerals and some organic materials, to create electromagnetic pulses that disrupted our systems. They didn't want to kill us, but they were willing to risk our lives to force us out. You don't understand, I explained to Lyra. Our people aren't adapted. They'll die if they go out. They need training. They need. The weak must die, she interrupted, her voice firm. Only then can the strong survive. Only then can humanity become one with Mars again. Her philosophy was brutal, but it had its own logic, viewed through their eyes. They believed humanity had taken the wrong path, that dependence on machines had made us weak and vulnerable. They saw themselves as the guardians of the true way. I tried to find a compromise. What if we work together? You teach us how to survive on the surface, and we share our knowledge with you. We can find a way to live together. Lyra shook her head. Your knowledge is poison. Your machines are chains. We don't want them. We want you to return to your origins. To the life Mars wants us to live. I realized it would be impossible to persuade them. They were fanatics, and their faith was unshakable. I had to return to the colony. I had to warn the Council of Elders. I have to leave, I told Lyra. My people are in danger. Go, she replied, without a trace of regret. But remember, Caleb. Mars will not wait forever. It wants its children back. I returned to the colony, following the same path. Anxious guards met me. I explained what had happened, but they looked at me with disbelief, as if I'd gone mad. The true ones? People living outside? Caleb, that's nonsense. You must be hallucinating from lack of oxygen, one of the guards declared, clearly not believing a word I said. I demanded an audience with the Council of Elders. They gathered in their somber chamber, where matters of resource allocation and planning for the next mining cycles were usually decided. I laid out everything I had seen and learned. About the existence of the true ones, their ability to live on the surface, their intentions. I showed them the records from my tablet, fragments of data confirming that the breaches originated from the lower levels. The council listened in silence. Then the chairwoman of the council, an elderly woman with sharp features, spoke. Caleb, we appreciate your dedication. But your words are fantasy. There are no true ones. It's more likely a group of renegades using old, abandoned technology to sow chaos. Perhaps they want to seize power. They want us to go to the surface. I exclaimed. They want us to abandon our technology. They think Mars will make us stronger. The council exchanged skeptical glances. That's madness. To go to the surface unprotected? You know what that means. We'll die. All of us. But they survived. Their bodies adapted. We cannot risk the lives of the entire colony based on your impressions. The chairwoman cut me off. We will strengthen our defenses. We will block all lower levels. We will search for these renegades and neutralize the threat. I realized they would never believe. They were too attached to their world, to their security, to their machines. They couldn't imagine life without them. You don't understand, I whispered. You're not just blocking them. You're blocking the truth. The truth that there's another way. That there's hope. My words hung in the air. The council made its decision. Colony 7 would defend itself. We would fight against those who simply wanted us to survive, but on their terms. And I knew it would lead to disaster. I left the council chamber with a heavy heart. I was torn between two worlds. A world of technology that granted us security but made us slaves, and a world of wild freedom that could lead to destruction. Lyra's voice echoed in my head, Mars will not wait forever. It wants its children back. And I wondered which of us were the true children of Mars. Those who hid in its womb, or those who bravely stepped onto its surface, accepting its gifts and its trials. I felt I had to make a choice. And that choice would determine the fate of Colony 7. Chapter 4, The Rift. The Council of Elders' decision was met with mixed reactions. Most of Colony 7's inhabitants, accustomed to stability and security, supported the intensified defense measures. Fear of the unknown and disbelief in the true ones were stronger. But there were also those who, like me, felt that something was wrong. Failures in the life support systems intensified. The air in the residential sections grew heavier, water scarcer. People began to fall ill. Panic grew. And as the situation worsened, more and more people began to ask questions that had previously been forbidden. I tried to act. I spread the information I had among those I trusted, engineers, technicians, some young scientists. I told them about the true ones, how they lived, how Mars might not be as deadly as we had been taught. But my words often drowned in the noise of the Council's propaganda, which branded the true ones as terrorists and saboteurs. They just want to steal our resources, the announcers bellowed over the internal communication channel. They are savages who will destroy us. But it didn't work as it used to. More and more people saw that the colony was dying. The systems that were supposed to protect us were themselves becoming a source of danger. One day, during another air purification system malfunction, I heard a scream. It was a child's scream. I rushed to Sector G3, where the nurseries were located. Other engineers were already there, frantically working to restore oxygen flow. A suffocating heaviness hung in the air. Children coughed, their faces pale. A little girl named Aaliyah, with whom I sometimes played when I visited that sector, lay unconscious. "We can't fix it," one of the technicians shouted, his voice filled with despair. "Everything's locked. They've completely cut off supply from external reservoirs." I looked at Aaliyah, at her helpless, gasping face. At that moment, I realized I had no choice. The Council couldn't be trusted. Their decisions were leading us to ruin. I took my tablet and pressed a few buttons, sending a message through all available channels, ignoring security protocols. "Attention, all inhabitants of Colony 7. My name is Caleb, Life Support Systems Engineer. Our systems are on the verge of collapse. The Council of Elders is hiding the truth from you. There are people living on the surface of Mars. They call themselves the true ones. They are not our enemies. They want us to go out. They say Mars has accepted them. They know how to survive. We must believe them. We must try. I am opening the emergency hatches on the lower levels. I ask you, follow me. This is our only chance." For a few seconds after my announcement, there was a deafening silence. Then, shouts erupted. Angry shouts, full of disbelief. But there were others too, shouts of hope. The guards were furious. They rushed towards me, trying to detain me, but my fellow engineers stood in my defense. Chaos ensued. Some residents began moving towards the lower levels, others towards the Council, demanding explanations. I broke through the crowd, pushing my way to the transport lift that would take me to those very lower levels. With me were several technicians and a group of young people who believed me. We were armed only with our knowledge and despair. When we reached the lower levels, the hatches I had opened were already activated. People crowded before them, hesitant to enter. The air was thick with dust and fear. "We can," I shouted, addressing them. "We can do this. Lyra and her people are waiting for us." And then the Council of Elders appeared, surrounded by a detachment of guards. The chairwoman looked at me with icy contempt. "Caleb, you are a traitor," she hissed. "You are leading these people to their deaths. You are leading us to a slow death." I countered. "We must give ourselves a chance." At that moment, a rumble echoed from beyond the hatch. The true ones were ready. Lyra, with a group of her warriors, awaited us. Now or never. I shouted, and surged forward, leading by example. A few people hesitated, but then moved after me. Others followed, spurred on by the fear of dying within the stifling walls of the colony. The guards tried to stop them, but they were too few. We passed through the hatch and found ourselves in the True One's cave. The air here was fresh, though unfamiliar. Lyra and her people looked at us with serious faces. "You came," Lyra said, nodding to me. There was no triumph in her eyes, only recognition. "We must learn," I replied. "Teach us." A new phase began. Adaptation. Chapter 5, Adaptation. The transition was chaotic and painful. Tens of thousands of Colony 7's inhabitants, accustomed to sterile cleanliness and a controlled environment, found themselves in the primitive caves of the True Ones. Panic, disease, conflict, all of it was inevitable. The True Ones weren't impatient, but they weren't overly gentle either. They offered us refuge but demanded that we learn. We, the engineers and scientists, with our tablets and calculations, found ourselves helpless in the face of Mars's wild, untamed nature. Lyra and her people taught us everything they knew. How to purify water using natural filters, how to find edible plants and animals in the deep caves, how to navigate by the stars on the Martian surface. They taught us to build primitive shelters from stone and clay, to extract minerals and use them to create tools. It was humbling. But we understood it was our only chance. My role was crucial. I was the bridge between the two groups. I translated, explained, mediated conflicts. I constantly had to remind my former compatriots that we weren't guests here, but students. And that the True Ones weren't our enemies, but our teachers, albeit harsh ones. "Your bodies are too weak," one of the True Ones' elders named Corvus told me, watching my people struggle to move rocks. "You've been in cages for too long. Mars will reject you if you don't make an effort." And he was right. Many from Colony 7 couldn't endure. Illnesses caused by unfamiliar food and environment claimed lives. Those who were too weak or too attached to their technology perished. It was cruel, but as Lyra said, Mars was conducting natural selection. But there were also those who adapted. Young, flexible minds. Children, who absorbed new knowledge and accustomed themselves to the harsh conditions the fastest. I saw how Aaliyah, that little girl who almost suffocated, now ran around the cave, laughing and playing with the True One's children. She was stronger than ever. I felt the changes myself. My body became more resilient, my senses sharpened. I learned to read the signs of nature that had once been invisible to me. I learned to breathe deeply, tasting the dust and minerals in the air. Meanwhile, the remaining people in Colony 7, under the Council's leadership, desperately tried to restore the systems. But without our knowledge, without full access to energy sources, without the ability to repair damaged sections, they were doomed. Constant malfunctions, sickness, hunger, Colony 7 was slowly dying. One night, Lyra approached me. We sat by the fire, watching the dancing shadows on the cave walls. "Our people want to go to the surface," she said. "The time has come." I nodded. I felt it too. Many of us, who had survived and adapted, were ready. We weren't afraid. We wanted to see the true face of Mars. The next day, a large group, those who had passed the trials, who had accepted Mars, gathered at the surface exit. We were dressed in primitive but effective environmental suits that the true ones had taught us to make from recycled materials and minerals. They weren't as high-tech as our old ones, but they were created in harmony with the planet. We stepped out. The Martian sun beat down, but it no longer felt hostile. The air was cold, but tolerable. We stood on the surface of the red planet, beneath its orange sky, no longer hiding in metal and concrete. We began to build. Not giant complexes, but small, self-sufficient settlements, using local resources. We used our knowledge gained in the colony, but applied it in a new way, in harmony with the environment. We learned to grow plants in open ground, using special bioreactors that transformed Mars's atmosphere. We learned to extract water from ice in the polar caps, using solar energy. We, the former inhabitants of Colony 7, brought our knowledge, and the true ones, their wisdom and adaptability. We built a new future where technology served nature, rather than dominating it. After a few months, as our surface settlements began to prosper, I descended into Colony 7 again. Darkness and desolation reigned there. Many sectors were without power. The air was heavy and smelled of death. I found the Council of Elders in their former meeting hall. They were thin, ill, but their eyes still burned with pride and arrogance. Caleb, the chairwoman, whispered, her voice weak. "You returned. To mock us?" "I returned to help," I replied. "We've built a new home on the surface. It's harsh, but it's alive. We can help you. We can show you the way." She shook her head. "No. We cannot. We are too old. We are too attached. We will die here, within the walls we built." I looked at them, and felt not anger, but sorrow. They were victims of their own pride and fear. They preferred to die in their security, rather than accept a chance at a new life. "You won't be alone," I said, and left them. As I exited Colony 7, I looked back at its somber, dying walls. It was the end of one era, but the beginning of another. Chapter 6, A New Sky. Years passed. Colony 7 became a ghost of the past, its metal structures slowly crumbling under the influence of the Martian atmosphere. Its remains served as a reminder of what happens when fear and unwillingness to change overcome common sense. And on the surface of Mars, new settlements flourished. We, the descendants of Colony 7, and the true ones, now a single people, simply calling ourselves Martians. We were descendants of Earth, but Mars had become our home, our teacher. Our cities were not made of steel and concrete, but of organic materials grown directly from the Martian soil and minerals extracted from its depths. They resembled huge, glowing flowers that harmoniously blended into the landscape. Our technologies were minimalistic yet effective, developed with principles of sustainability and respect for the planet. We learned to harness the energy of the sun and wind, filter the air with specially bred microorganisms, and grow food adapted to Martian conditions. I became one of the elders of the new society. My hands were calloused from work, and my face wrinkled from the Martian sun. But my eyes shone. I saw how the new generation, already born on the surface, grew strong and free. They ran across the red sands, fearless of radiation or the thin atmosphere. Their bodies were robust, their minds open. Lyra, also an elder, was my steadfast companion. We often sat together, watching the Martian sunset, and reminiscing about the past. "You were right, Caleb," she said one day, her voice soft. "Not everyone could survive. But those who could became stronger. We learned from you," I replied. "Learned to listen to the planet, not try to subdue it. We weren't a perfect society. There were arguments, conflicts, disagreements. But we learned to overcome them because we had a common goal, to live in harmony with Mars, preserving our humanity." One day, I stood on a dune, looking out at the landscape stretching before me. My children, now adults, worked in the field, and my grandchildren played nearby, laughing under the orange sky. On the horizon, the outlines of new cities were visible. I thought of Earth, of that distant, lost planet. Perhaps we would never return there. But we had found our home. We survived. We adapted. Mars was no longer just a red desert. It was alive. It was our home. And we were its children. We had learned to live under its sky, breathe its air, and finally, to become part of something greater than just our own survival. And this was just the beginning. The beginning of a new chapter in the history of humanity, written on the red sands of Mars, under a new, alien, yet so familiar sky.